talk to me about breaking through mental barriers and Justin's approach to it and what you learned through this podcast.
Yeah. I found this part of the podcast to be so enriching. So for listeners, he does and Tom, you're a mountaineer, so you should actually probably talk about this more than I should, right? Like what is it that Justin does that allows him to break through mental barriers? What's the activity? Like what exactly happens?
So mountaineering is essentially, well, his perspective is climbing any type of mountain
Okay.
and working your way up through whatever environment that entails. So you'll be in
Yeah.
the alpine exposed mountain, very difficult, challenging environment. Obviously, there's a large risk of injury or catastrophe or death, and these things kind of, I'm guessing from our conversation and through every other mountaineer that I know, that these things bring him alive. And for some reason, putting ourselves in an element of peril is the most enlivening thing we can do. Um, so yeah, that's a that's a rough description, a quick
Yeah.
description.
And so I'm so glad you said it brings him alive, right? And what he mentioned before in the podcast was that he's not an adrenaline junkie. That's not what it's about. It's not about feeling that sense of danger. It's not the high that you might get from that. For him, breaking through mental barriers is what it sounds like is facing fear and having the experience of coaching yourself through not giving up on something. So you're faced with a crevasse or extremely like windy conditions, slippery conditions is what he was describing. You have two choices. You
Mhm.
can go back down, you can give up, you can say, all right, I'm done, or you can finish what you started. And it sounds like finishing what he started when it's super challenging of body and mind, that leads to, and this is his word, a renewal.
Oh, nice. I missed the word
I
renewal.
know.
Yeah,
I
nice.
know.
The whole death and rebirth
I had a
analogy.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes.
I bet.
Yeah, and so again, because he's describing this super challenging physical and mental thing, but not as an adrenaline junkie. It's not about the high. It's just about breaking through that mental barrier. And it's so interesting that he tied it to when we're children, our teachers and our parents play that role for us. So my background is in swimming. So I was a swim coach, I was a swim teacher for young children under 10 years old for the most part. And yes, like a large part of my job was believing that kids could do things that they weren't sure that they could do. And that role of being the person who's like, you're doing this, you're not giving up. We have to be that person for ourselves when we're adults. Not all of us have that inner voice that says, you're not giving up, you are doing this.
Do you reckon there's an element of it that we kind of, like, I see a lot of kids, especially, that are taught to kind of outsource that belief and not
Yeah.
generate it themselves. It's like, I'm going to look around for approval, and then
Yes.
I'm speaking a lot for myself as well. But
Yeah.
like, I used to spend way more time than I currently do looking around for approval. Like, am I doing the right thing? Do I
Yes.
believe in myself? Do I trust myself?
Mhm.
And through mountaineering, actually, is probably one of the, actually, yeah, and the military was a huge part, and CrossFit was a huge part, and a few other
Yeah.
things. But like, a lot of it is spending time in the mountains. Like, that is enough to bring you to the point where you confront difficulty and confront your limits on a
Mhm.
very um, obvious place, and it's brought to light in a crazily dramatic way.
Yeah. Can you describe an experience of that happening? Can you remember anything?
Yeah, there's two or three that I'm thinking of. Probably the
Okay.
one that comes to mind was actually, it's funny, like, in terms of meeting the objective that we originally set out to meet, it was it was a failure. We did not achieve the objective. In terms
Yeah.
of not dying, I'm still here, so it's a win. So
Yay.
you're conflicting objectives. I love telling the story. Anyway, it was my second to last week out living in Canada, and
Yeah.
we'd been doing a lot of ski touring, and I knew that I was coming home. I knew that, like, this was the big one that I had to make it count. And there's um, a summit called Mount Joffrey, which is in British Columbia, kind of yeah, it's this incredible face with this very narrow couloir, so kind of gully that you have to boot back up. So skis are on your back, you're kicking steps up, and I think it's like 800 meters of elevation or something that you've got to
Ooh,
get up, and it's steep. It's like 40 to 45 degrees the whole way up. I think occasionally it
wow.
touches 50 degrees, so it's like it's real steep.
It's up.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and if you fall, you're going to be lucky if everything's okay. So we were
Yeah.
working our way up to that, and the whole objective was like ski up to a base camp, create a base camp, stay there overnight, with all the challenges that entails, and
Yeah.
then in the morning get up super early, ski up the glacier, watching out for crevasses, all this kind of thing,
Yeah.
actually cross a frozen lake, and then
Yeah.
boot back up this couloir to ski
Okay.
back down.
Okay.
And we got halfway up this glacier on the first day, sorry, when we're just going for a test run. We're
Yeah.
all roped up. You have to be roped up for crevasses just in case one person falls in. It's much
Yeah.
easier to pull them out if you're
Yes.
already roped up than it is to chuck a
Right.
rope down and they tie themselves up in case they're injured, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And the downside of that is when you're skiing, one of the biggest risks is avalanches. So if one person gets swept into an avalanche, if you're roped up, all three of you, or however many people are with you, get swept into
Yeah.
an avalanche. So we're playing this game, and we're reading this like it's the wind slat, or the snow is quite reactive. So it means that like when you put your foot through a crust or a layer, you can see what's called propagation, which is where like there's a big crack that forms, and you can see these slabs of avalanches happening, which is
Oh.
when they happen. So like we're
Yeah.
thinking about that, and it's like it's right on the edge of like, is it safe, is it not safe, like
Yeah.
we always made good decisions up until that point. And we're wandering up, skiing across, and kind of talking about it. Incredible, very exposed, like beautiful scenery is, but also remember that this is like the objective that I've been working towards. Everything that I've done until that point, like this is what I wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And then looked over as this kind of this roar, this crash. It sounded like everyone's looking up because it sounded like a plane, and a cornice the size of probably a bus had fallen from a ridgeline just over to our left,
Yeah.
and it was tumbling down and set off a very large avalanche, which was pretty damn scary.
Yeah.
That is the first avalanche that big that I'd seen. I've set off a few small ones. I've been kind of engaged. I've been very lucky, but like that was the first one that I saw that was like, that is big and terrifying.
Yeah.
And it just wiped out the whole side of this mountain when we were tied up. And then that came into that decision of like, do we untie and carry on? Do we continue our process of walking up or ski touring up this mountain? Do we ski straight down? And there are all these options. But in that moment, there was nothing else happening in my life. There was this decision, and it was very much like there was zero overwhelm, zero pressure, zero almost zero fear, just very logical of like, this is why we're here, this is what we're doing. And all of us, I think, with our experience and competence, like it became this very conscious decision. We chose to come back down. We chose to not go up, which I think was probably the right decision.
Yeah.
We had a great day skiing anyway, and hit a few other objectives which were less sketchy. But yeah, there's the that was really when I had that kind of that challenge that formed a new opinion, or the challenge that formed a new belief, or kind of I was very able to drop a lot of the bullshit of must achieve goal and went forward towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a deep state of clarity.
Yeah. Very present.
Yeah.
Very focused on what's happening now. Very essentially free nature. And when we're talking about free nature, it doesn't mean that stuff doesn't go wrong.
Right.
It means that when it does go wrong, you have the presence of mind to think about it.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yeah. Very clearly. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. And it's so interesting that your first instinct towards breaking through a mental barrier wasn't pushing yourself hard to complete something.
It was the mental barrier there was, until that point, I'd always been very objective focused, must achieve this. Like I definitely came from the military, that focus is like, I've got to do this 30-mile load carry. I've got to complete this exercise. I've got to do this. This is what I'm there for. And in the military, that's probably the right attitude to have to a point. Especially when you're going through training, that is the attitude that you need to succeed.
Yes.
But when you get out into the real world, like that sometimes limits us. So that was the mental barrier that I had to work through there.
You got what you needed.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a bit more wisdom.
Yes. Ooh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So where do you see that? How did you interpret this kind of pushing through the belief, like letting those, like finding that new mental level with Justin? Like what did you glean from that?
He ties it to CrossFit. And for a lot of us, we're training for mental health to move and help our bodies feel good, because that's what helps our minds feel good. And of course, a lot of us are really engaged in and motivated by competition. And that's another place to really break through mental barriers. It's a daily assessment on what mental barrier needs to be broken through.
Go on, tell me more.
Sometimes the mental barrier, the challenge is, the classic perfectionism, all or nothing thinking. I either show up and kill it, or I don't show up to the gym. If today's not going to be a perfect day, then I'm not going. Sometimes the mental barrier is in showing up and knowing that you're only going to have like 70 to 80% and showing yourself and believing it when you do it, that it's good enough. That's the key point there. It can't just be, all right, I showed up and did 70 to 80%, but I'm beating myself up for it. It's actually giving yourself the credit for progress over perfection.
Yeah, what's nice there is you're setting yourself a physical goal, yes, of course, but a mindset related goal as well. Of like, this is what I want to achieve, but this is who I'm going to be along the way. And that focus on you replaces the value on the effort that you put in rather than the outcome that you achieve.
Yeah, that's right. But then taking it back to kind of the other side of it from Justin's perspective, when you show up and do a workout and you give yourself the opportunity to have that don't give up mentality, that is a major confidence builder. Yeah. So deciding that even though the voice in your head is telling you, I'm going to come in last, I'm going to fail this lift, it's not going to be good enough, someone's going to be disappointed in me, they're going to judge me. Even hearing those voices and saying, I'm here for me right now. This is my mental barrier to break through. I'm not going to give up. What a gift.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, yeah, a gift. I love that phrasing of a gift. Like, this is something that is fantastic. This is prepared for me. It's an opportunity that's given to me for my growth.
That's
like
right.
every challenge is.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up around kind of breaking through mental barriers that Justin spoke about?
A last piece. I think a lot of us feel this way sometimes. What he said was, the reason to push ourselves in the gym or out on a mountain is because life is going to be hard. And you make choices every single day how you're going to live your life. If we're stuck in this monotony of always making the easy choices, always putting ourselves in positions of being comfortable, when discomfort occurs, and it's a when, not an if, but when discomfort occurs, when pain happens, we're not prepared.
Yeah.
So we can transfer what we do in the gym or out on the mountain or however else we like to challenge ourselves. We can transfer that don't give up, you can do this attitude to other aspects of life.
Yeah, nice. It's exactly back into that exposure therapy kind of thing.
Yes.
Like you're gonna, by exposing yourself, by willfully exposing yourself to challenge, to discomfort, to progressively more challenging situations, you find again that you are tougher than you realized, and that kind of that muscle begins you begin to be able to flex that muscle and to use
Yes.
that kind of that mental toughness in other scenarios, and it applies to other scenarios.
I'm so glad that you said progressive because I think that's an important thing to point out too.
Yeah.
It's not, I show up to CrossFit in my first 6 months and I'm making myself RX workouts because that's what don't give up mentality is. It's exposing ourselves in smart ways to those challenges. It's
Yeah,
taking it step by step, not
exactly.
trying to jump all the way to the top.
Exactly. And an inch beyond where you're currently comfortable doing it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter like what the general feeling of the gym is. It's about you and your journey. And it's about taking it one step beyond for you each time. So if you're starting as an elite athlete, fantastic. Like you can
Yeah.
take those steps forwards. If you're
Yeah.
starting, it's your first day in the gym in 30 years, like fantastic, because you can take those steps forwards. And this is your journey and it's your progressive exposure to that creates, that forges your character. It gives you something to lean against, to kind of to push against, something to use to hone yourself.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I love this category because it's something that we can voluntarily do. We
Yes.
can choose objectives. We can choose the most challenging situation that we can muster,
Yeah.
or that we can think about and put ourselves in it, because
Yeah.
life is so convenient and comfortable and easy right now that we're not going to stumble into it anymore. You have to choose to put yourself into the position of going into the gym. You have to choose to take a cold shower in the morning. You have to
Yes.
choose to undertake a big competition or a hugely challenging event once a year or twice a year or whatever. Like the concept of misogi. Um, yeah,
Describe that.
yeah, it's I'm going to butcher this because I haven't read the relevant text recently, but it's essentially a journey or a mythological journey from Japanese history or the
Yeah.
Japanese myth into the underworld.
Okay.
A journey, and that upon commencing it teaches you everything that you need to learn to find your growth. So yeah,
Mm.
finding that is important to us.
Yeah. Can you quote the text so that I can go find it?
Yeah, The Comfort Crisis by
Got
Michael
it.
Easter. He talks about it quite a lot. That's the easiest way to get into it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But like choosing a misogi like once a year or once every 18 months, his prescription is fantastic. And he is going to come on the podcast just when he releases the next book.
Okay.
He talks about once every 18 months, choosing something that you've got, I think, a 50-50 chance of succeeding or failing.
Ooh,
So like
cool.
you've really got to know, like, can I do this?
Yeah.
Is this possible for me? And putting yourself in that scenario. And his two rules for it is you're not allowed to tell anyone just for telling people's sake. Like if it comes up in
Okay.
conversation, then great. But like
Sure.
you're not allowed to go and boast about it. The point isn't for social approval.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to die. Those are the two things.
Good
So
disclaimer.
yeah. So those are two things you've got to do.
A rash of deaths caused by book.
Yeah, exactly. He gives like a few good examples. One of them is a football team, American football team,
Yeah.
carried a rock underwater from one side of a bay to another. So they dive down, pick up this rock, walk with it as far as they could, come back up to
What?
the surface. Next person would go, and it was something ridiculous, like 5 miles,
Oh
and
my
it took them
God.
all day to do this. And it's like no
Yeah.
one died. They didn't know whether they could do it,
Right?
but they did it. So I think these kind of annual misogis are probably a brilliant thing to bring
Neat.
into our lives.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to bring up around there?
I'd actually love to hear what you loved about this podcast.
Yeah, sweet. I liked a lot how Justin was able to look back at his earlier challenges, things that were in that moment incredibly tough to deal with, and saw them not as obstacles he had to clear, but as challenges that helped him to prepare. So things that essentially went wrong. He talks about on Mount Shasta,
Yeah.
the fear there, the difficulty, the taking one step at a time, and he talks about post holing up to his waist in snow, and like how difficult that is. And he saw those as essential for his growth and essential to success in the long run. And I think this is something that we can apply in relation to injuries, in relation
Oh,
to overcoming nutritional challenges,
yeah.
in sorting out our sleep. It all forges a better version of yourself if you voluntarily confront it.
Oh, that's so true. Well, we're so quick to be resentful of our obstacles and challenges when it's just like we're talking about in this whole episode. It sounds like that's your opportunity to grow. Like what we really want is growth. That's what we
Yeah.
want. But the only way to do it is to be challenged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bill Irvine, in his book, The Stoic Challenge, which I've recommended about 1,000 times in the last few weeks,
Yeah.
he talks about seeing it as a challenge from the Stoic gods or a gift from the Stoic gods. It's like he doesn't believe in any gods, but he calls them the Stoic gods. And it's like, okay,
Sure.
they've given me this this obstacle, this opportunity to challenge myself. And it's like, oh, okay, I see what you've done there.
Mm.
I see how you put this in my way. Isn't that clever of you? And now this is my
Yeah.
chance to overcome it. Like he treats it with that kind of like lightness. It's like, oh
Humor.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, he
Yeah.
lightens the tone because quite often we're like, oh, this is shit. Why is it happening to me? Like
Yeah.
this is awful.
It's
Um,
too hard.
yeah, exactly. So now
Yeah.
it becomes an opportunity again, a gift.
Yeah. Isn't it the story of the 12 labors of Hercules? It's very like that.
Can
That's
you
what I'm
remind me?
I can't.
Okay.
I'm having like a very brief flicker of what that is. But yeah, the labors were they were tasks like set before him to prove something if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And
We'll
so
go
it
away and research, and then for the next podcast, we'll come back to
I'll,
it.
I'll fill you in. You'll have
Yeah.
to download the next episode then.
Make sure you subscribe. That's really cool. That's really cool. What else was on your list?
His flexibility in changing the vision. I think that's an important thing for coaches on a coaching track and career, as well as just athletes, like looking at how we change as we progress further and further into CrossFit. When we first start, maybe we're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to compete in CrossFit because it looks so cool and awesome. And as we get older, our life changes and we have to think, okay, well, why am I still doing this? Like I no longer want that. So what brings me here every day? How do we maintain motivation? So his flexibility and changing his vision, right? So we started Morning Chalk Up, and it was uh, bringing together all of the news from different news outlets into one place. It was filling a gap in information. But now they're leading the news cycle because of the 2018 like firing of all of CrossFit's media staff. So they basically were able to take advantage of a huge opportunity. But now it's shifting again. So his ability to be really adaptable rather than sticking to what he has been successful with so far, I think is one of his better strengths and is a testament to the success of Morning Chalk Up.
Yeah, what I thought
Yeah.
was cool was how he starts with this extrinsic kind of objective and
Mm,
this kind of like, okay, this is my version of success that I'm aiming at now. And right now it's my true north. But he's able to maybe adapt that depending on how the outside world's going, and that's important too. Like an athlete needs to adapt their objectives depending on like what competitions are available, who is the competition, and
yes.
it's that flexibility within that. But also I would guess that he's finding as he progresses something that is more relevant to his own personality and who he is. He's finding a goal that is an objective that is not only about what he wants to achieve, but also who he is fundamentally equipped to become.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the quotes I pulled from this was you need to marshal your best assets. So like the in any given situation, what he describes is like scrambling. So it's the ability to not get stuck standing when the avalanche is coming, right? Not to get stuck standing, but the ability to dodge and adjust course. It's a really important skill set.
How do you, I think this is a nice place to introduce a how to.
Yeah.
How do you work with athletes to guide them to their vision initially, and then to shed that as we go and to kind of find new layers of the vision?
I smiled so big. One of my favorite things to do is to help athletes find their purpose. It's
Nice.
a big task. And finding purpose is something that I think most people are called to do at some point or another. We kind of realize we've been stuck in a rut, living life isn't as fulfilling as we know that it could be. And yeah, so finding purpose is a large task, but there are a couple of really simple questions that I like to ask athletes and myself regularly every 6 months or so to kind of check in on what's really motivating and driving to me. The first one is, if you knew that you would be successful, if you knew that you had all of the resources, talent, time, energy, money, everything, if you knew that you had everything that you need and you knew that you would be successful, what would you do? So that's the first question.
Why is that so important? Why is it so important to have all the like, oh, everything's going to be taken care of, you're going to like have met your own goals? Why is that so successful in identifying purpose?
It takes away all of the excuses.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right. If you know that you have enough money and time and resources and talent and team, there's no reason not to do it.
Yeah. Nice. I like the way it removes excuses. Sorry, I interrupted you on your question. On
Oh my
your second
gosh, it's
question.
fine. Oh, it's all good. Yeah. The next question is, it's somewhat morbid. If you knew that you were going to die in a year, if you got that news today, what would you do with your time? What would make that last year meaningful to you?
What do you find changes for most people when you ask them that question?
Urgency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really easy to, we talk about this a lot. We have a tendency to overestimate what we can achieve in 2 to 3 months, but underestimate what we can achieve in 2 to 3 years. And the way that that plays out in this question is, I've taken away a lot of your time that you thought you would have to goof off and dilly-dally around. I think a word that I've heard you use is faff. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, faffing or lollygagging. They're my two favorite phrases.
Right? We waste so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. We waste so much time. And that's excuse me, that is especially true when we're facing something that makes us really uncomfortable, where in order to achieve it, we would have to become the person that we know we could be. Yeah.
So that
Stop
urgency
avoiding.
means that we get rid of all the crap basically in life. We stop faffing and we focus on what is the most important thing.
What do you mean? What's the most important thing?
What's the most important thing to me? What's the most relevant thing to me? What it intrinsically brings me meaning? Yeah,
exactly.
What I find quite interesting is when I focus on when I bring up the topic of my own death, when I focus on my own death, it means that I stop valuing the opinions of other people so highly and start valuing my own independent thoughts.
Damn right.
Yeah. That's what it's for. Yes.
Who cares?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to live another 50 years, the same question applies. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Really nice. Are there any other questions in your pursuit of values and purpose?
Yeah, I think you can do a lot with values. For most people who are trying to uncover what they're passionate about, the question to ask ourselves is, what are the unique gifts and talents that we love to use, that we wish we could use more? Then you can also tie that into, what are the qualities about yourself that you admire, that you would not change for anyone for any reason? And what are the qualities that you admire in other people that you wish you had? That's a really good way to figure out what our passions and our values are. Having those, this is actually inspired by work from Mark Devine of Seal Fit. It's the 3 P's in one thing: passions, principles, purpose, and one thing. And my dog is lying on the floor snorting. His passion is in fighting with his sister on my office carpet.
It's a great dog's passion.
That's right.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else in your list of topics today?
For today, he strikes a really interesting balance with risk taking too. I think that's relevant for athletes.
Go on, tell me about that.
Yeah. So when he first started Morning Chalk Up, he was engaged in like pretty high risk, right? So it was all in, really trying to grow and push. They were doing 6 days a week publishing, which is a little bit too much, but it was very intentional at the time and also very wearing. When it was time to pull back, again, that adaptability comes in. He was able to do that. And that can feel risky to incorporate any kind of change.
I really enjoy the way that he focused. He almost bit off more than he could chew on multiple occasions. But the only way he found out that it was more than he could chew was by taking that bite. It's like you're never going to know unless you take a swing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And there are places to do that that are healthy and not. Yeah. What about you? Is there anything left on your list?
So we touched on exposure therapy and fear, like
Yeah.
kind of progressively moving beyond your limits and finding your new elements of discomfort. Oh, the one thing that I really liked is he talks about the value of getting outside and disconnecting. Like
Yes.
we were just talking before this, like before we press record, about the value of like kind of the physical aspect of mindset. So regulation of our state and our nervous system, and being outside, being disconnected from the electricity, essentially from tech,
Yes.
being disconnected from other people. Sometimes you get that solitude, like that too is something that is incredibly valued. That like I know
Yes.
that like this is why dogs are so good. Another reason why dogs are so good, like
Another
getting
one.
outside, another reason to add to the 33,000 already that we've listed just in 7 podcasts. That like they force you to get outside, they force you to walk the dogs, or to
Yes.
walk them, they kind of you have to go outside, be somewhat present. Like sure, you can probably listen to a podcast at the same time, but they force you to be outside, to lift your eyes and look at a horizon instead of the screen that's a foot away from your face. Like they
Uh,
encourage you
I,
to kind of get some daylight, to
yes.
probably socialize, to be tactile, to maybe get some barefoot shoes on, or actually just go barefoot and to walk around and get that sensory experience, to not be sat
Yeah.
down. Like it's all very important in managing your state, and occasionally getting bored and being cold and uncomfortable or too hot. Like all this stuff is so valuable for our physical health and our mental health too.
I have found that if I take my phone with me on the dog walk, I am more likely to be rushing and anxious all day. So, very intentionally, I leave my phone at home now just so that I don't have a screen with me. I can't listen to music or a podcast. It's time for me to just be in the moment. And yes, it does help with nervous system regulation.
Nice. What a
Yeah.
place to end.
What a place to end.
What a place to end.
You guys are such